Errol, it's been what, like almost a year. No, almost a year. Not quite, but we met on Clubhouse, and I've been really fascinated by your background, but also what you do now, after the whole, after your injury. But I would love to know more about, who you were, and then
Yeah.
what led to the injury itself.
Yeah. So I was in the SEAL teams. I was a Navy SEAL back in the 90s. And I loved it. I was planning on staying in the SEAL teams for my entire career. And I suffered two major head injuries while I was a Navy SEAL. One was a fall from a 30-foot ladder during an operation. And the other one was we were entering a room and there was no floor. And I took a 10-foot header, down onto the concrete below me. You know, in essence, I'm lucky to be alive, quite frankly, from both of those injuries. But I was medically discharged from the Navy shortly after that, but not because of my head injuries, because of the other injuries that I sustained, right? The ones that were obvious, the damage to the nerves in my arm and things like that. And I remember at the medical review board, it was very difficult for me because I look very much like I do now, right? I was injured, but I managed to, as Navy SEALs do, I had two casts on both arms, and I still went in and exercised on the machines as best, it's just what we do. And so when I went into the medical review board, I looked completely healthy. And they kind of were questioning what I was doing there. Now that really made me very angry because I didn't ask to go there. This is things you're told to do. And what I said to him was, I said, look, I don't know if I'm ever going to get full use of my arms back and things like that. But I said, what bothers me the most is these headaches. They just won't stop, and they're debilitating. And they dismissed those concerns. And I vowed at that moment, because I was made to feel the way I was made to feel, like I was lying or something, that I was never going to talk about those injuries again. And it's not until we met almost a year ago that I started to tell my story. So that's kind of a little bit about who I am and why we're even talking. And so when we talk about invisible injuries and living with it, I got these at a time when literally medical experts were not even thinking that something like this existed, that traumatic brain injury was really a thing.
Right. Well, it's interestingly enough, I started my practice back in the early 90s. And I do remember working for a brain injury company, and the history of the brain injury rehab wasn't always so robust, meaning a lot of the clients who's had brain injury symptoms were taken to psychiatric hospitals because, or dismissed because they think that the symptoms are they're just malingering. And I think that, just working, for what, like 30 years. And I've dealt with a lot of, survivors whose injuries are really not visible. And it causes them a lot more pain, I think, mentally and psychologically, to the point that it does trigger some psychiatric, conditions, either, anxiety, depression, or even just, the anger really boils up because not feeling that they're understood.
Yep.
And I think that's the one of the biggest hurdle, is recognizing that there is something, not just them recognizing what's affecting them, but also others believing them and
That's right.
recognizing it. Because I think that it's so easy to see disability when someone has a broken arm like you did, but not so easy when you're just talking about headaches or sensitivity to light or sensitivity to sounds, and feeling inept in a lot of ways because you're not understanding why how can I not comprehend this document that I used to be able to do right before my fall? So I've had a lot of, successful clients and high level clients that really you could see there's the difference in their performance, but the expectation that they put on you is still high. So only you understand, how it's affecting you. Um, was there ever a time, what was the low point of that whole journey for you?
Well, I don't know if it's fortunately there wasn't a low point or unfortunately. What it was more of a confusion for me.
Mhm.
So what I know now, based on the work I've had done, was the injuries to my brain affected the area of the brain that's responsible for emotional recognition and control. Right,
Mhm.
I'm unable to process properly my emotions, and I would just struggle with the fact that sometimes I would just do things and make decisions that were so counter to what I wanted to be and who I wanted to be. It just didn't make any sense. Um, why sometimes I would not get angry at a situation that clearly called for at least some type of functional anger, right? Anger is not necessarily a bad emotion,
Right.
right? Sometimes we should feel angry.
Absolutely.
And why sometimes I would get so angry over things that just weren't really worth the time of day. And so that was my struggle of just not being able to understand why I did these things. And that, once I realized what the problem was, it's like this whole new world opened up for me, right? So for me, and I can't, I'm only going to speak from my experience, right? Because I don't know, as much as I'm involved in this, I don't know how similar everybody's experiences are with traumatic brain injury. So I'm speaking just strictly to mine. So it was really a struggle with emotions and processing emotions properly, acting on those emotions in a proper way. And there is a proper way to act on emotions. There's varying degrees, but so there wasn't exactly one low point. It was just a series of confusing episodes that just started to make me question myself. So then every time something went wrong, because I worked very hard at understanding this and I couldn't. And every time something went wrong, I immediately went to me. Okay, where is this my fault? Because I seem to do this all the time. There was just no rhyme or reason to my reactions. That really weighs on you after a while. Then it chips away at your confidence as a human being. And it chips away at the way you can look at relationships and evaluate it. Is this the right relationship for me or the wrong relationship for me? And I think it's that those things in and of itself start to lead to bouts of depression. Right now, I don't know physiologically if a brain injury just naturally causes depression. You would know that better than I do. But what I do know is the effects of what I just described, it really made me sad sometimes, because then you also have to deal with the fallout of your poor decisions based on my inability to process those emotions. So there wasn't one down point. There was just several very distressing, consistently distressing moments that started to eat away at my self-esteem, quite frankly.
Most of the time, from what I've seen, is what you're saying. It's that confusion, not knowing what's wrong with me, or not knowing, why can I not do this? And why did I react this way? My friends are reacting this way. My family's reacting this way towards me. But it's so hard to always carry, like, for you to be able to, like videotape yourself and in every moment and be able to identify what you did wrong, or was it them that did you wrong, or is it how you perceived it, right? So there's a lot of things, and I know that, and I totally agree with you that the compounding effect of that does make someone feel like, wow, I mean, what, questioning their worth, or why
Mhm.
can I not do this anymore? Because you've gone through life and you were in the you're a Navy SEAL and you did all these things. You were in the top of your game. So
Mhm.
for you to identify, to kind of realize, wow, I can't do this, I can't do that, and if I try to do it differently, it kind of like crashes on my face. So it there's a lot of things that really contributes to the depression and the mood changes and the anger. Sometimes it's so complex because you really have to figure out what the bottom of that iceberg is. It's not just what you see in brain injury. Did you also experience that lack of sleep?
Yeah, I did. I didn't sleep well. I can't. Before I started to get some treatment, which I'm sure we'll talk about later,
Mhm.
I I don't think I got a full night's sleep in the 25 odd years. You
Wow.
know, So and now look, I'm not saying that I was up all night or I only got 2 hours of sleep a
Mhm,
night, but there would
mhm,
be nights where you just didn't sleep.
mhm,
And a lot of it though was because of what I was thinking, right? It was because what happened today? Why did I do that? Why did I say that? Why did I act that way? Or why do I think these people are saying these things to me? So if I had to really reflect, again, the lack of sleep, I'm sure, was physiological to some degree, but it was also a result of the challenge of processing what was happening, and then really
absolutely.
just beating yourself up, right? So you're up at night and you're just your mind's working and you're just so confused. And I think in hindsight, that was really where my lack of sleep came,
Mhm.
because just you're so confused. So again, I don't know if there's a physiological aspect to a brain injury that prevents you from sleeping, but I do know that was, again, as I look back on these years, I think that was it.
I do know when I'm working with clients who are higher level, they tend to not sleep because they overthink
Yeah.
and things that they want to go back to what they were doing before. And so by trying to explore that, sometimes they do not have the right maybe insight or monitoring, self-monitoring, that different challenges comes about.
Some of this, when you act out, when you respond in an emotional way that again, for me, obviously I wasn't able to process. So there, if you're not processing, you're just kind of acting randomly.
Mhm.
And I went back, weirdly, I was able to go back a long time and think about those moments where I really overreacted to things. Um, and the funny thing was, in each of the instances that I can remember, I wasn't wrong for being angry, right? So it was weird. My general emotion was accurate. This person said or did this thing, and I rightfully could have been angry. I just exploded.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, and look, with my background being a SEAL, I was an FBI special agent for many years. I'm all that very macho, stuff that goes down on a resume. You know, when you're in those situations, and even if your general emotion is the right emotion, overreacting in that way, people just all of a sudden now they're just focused on, oh, Errol overreacts. Oh, look at he's a short, a spitfire, short wire. He's a hothead,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden you had to start contending with that label that people put on you. But
Right.
again, when I was in hindsight, I don't believe I was wrong for feeling the way I felt. I just wasn't able to process it properly. I just acted on it.
Mhm.
And that'll get you into trouble. It could be any emotion, right?
It
Anger
could
is
be any
beautiful.
emotion,
It could
right?
be jealousy. It could be insecurity. It could be love. Look,
Mhm.
sometimes I'm a pretty fun guy. I'm a pretty happy
Mhm.
guy, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes I get so happy,
Mhm.
I overdo it, right? So it's like, okay, relax. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but over time, people are like, this dial it back a little bit, okay?
It's like all or nothing.
It's all or nothing. Every absolute bit of whatever that emotion is, I let it go to the fullest. And there was a range of them, right? And I guess I focus on anger because anger is the one that scares people. Anger is the one that stands out, right? And especially again with the perception of who I could be based on my background, then coming with anger, it can really scare people.
Right.
Now it never resulted. I want to be clear. It never got to the point of physical violence, but
more like an outburst or
right.
your voice, and it can become threatening.
Absolutely. So that's again, those are some of the challenges with just not knowing what was happening. And some of the things that I've heard when I've talked to people. What I learned now is, CT scans and MRIs don't show
No,
the
they
brain
don't.
injury. So you get these people who, for me, right? I was one of them. You go in, they do the whole thing on you, your head's fine.
Right.
Because I don't know, there wasn't a sign that said, no, there's traumatic brain injury there.
No, you're absolutely right. The CT scan
Frustration, like, well, the doctor said I was fine.
doesn't really let you just relax your brain.
No.
You carry that around.
It does. And especially if you're a conscientious person. Most of us are conscientious people. Most of us care. Most of us want to be good. So when you realize you're operating outside of your best self and you just have no handle on it, again, I think it's hard for me to say what causes the depression. I think the times I got depressed was just because what else am I don't know what else to do. I don't know why I can't get a handle on this thing. Right? Sleeping. We went through that. So it beats me whether or not, again, that's just a physiological function of a brain injury. But for me, I can tell you it was just the cumulative effect of frustration and not knowing.
And even someone who was never affected by a brain injury would suffer the same things. The only thing is that, like after a brain injury or concussion, it's harder to process things and it's harder to keep your emotions balanced because everything is over firing or not firing. Right. And then that frustration builds up. You can only hold it off for so long. I think actually, I always tell people it's kind of like that, like laundry, you'll say, oh, I won't deal with that today. And then the next day, and then by the end of the week, you have this pile of laundry and you just get frustrated.
Yeah. And it wasn't until, so I worked very, very hard. It's kind of how I built my business. I just started to understand that I need to be so in tune to every emotion I'm having all day, right? That's all I did. I literally started going, how am I feeling right this second? How am I feeling as I'm about to walk into this, this interaction? And then then recognizing how am I intended or how am I probably going to act based on what I've seen, right? So I had in my mind how I'm feeling in the past, how that emotion made me react. And then I start saying, okay, now how do I want to behave, right? What's my plan now to execute that? And what from my research that I've done, and that's really what I built my leadership process on, that thought cycle. If you do these things, you're going to make good conscious decisions. They might end up being the wrong decisions, but they'll be conscious decisions, right? There'll be decisions that you can look back on and go, you know what? I didn't pay attention to the emotion. I have to check that next time. I know that now because it's a process. Well, I did that and it worked, but it was exhausting. So I would have to take a 2-hour nap in the middle of the day, every day, or just somewhere, there'd be time, when I was in the FBI, I would just have to take sick days because I was so mentally and emotionally exhausted because especially in that role, right? I can't be out interviewing a bad guy, right? I have a gun, for God's sake. You get into very, stressful situations. So that's when I really started this whole thing. always being aware because I'm in a position of massive responsibility.
Right.
And so always thinking that way, it would just get me so exhausted.
Exhausting.
So I would take
Exhausting.
literally 2 or 3 days of sick days just so
Right.
I could go home and sleep.
Did
And
you
so,
work full time?
yeah, I worked full time.
Well, one thing that I know that if you exhaust yourself physically and cognitively, it might take a day or two to even just recover. And
Yeah,
so I didn't know if you had to modify your work days so that you can recover in between.
yeah. So, again, and those are the things that I had to make adjustments for.
Right.
There was times when I first joined the FBI that was back in 2003 or four. So it was about 4 years after my head injuries. The headaches were still coming. So, look, I managed to get myself medically cleared and pass examinations, which is fine because they don't do head examinations, right? But I worked in New York City, and I don't know if you're familiar with New York City, but when you're on any of those highways, it's like taking your life into your own hands. And I remember I would be getting these headaches. And if anybody's listening from New York, they know the Belt Parkway.
Mhm.
And I'd be on the Belt Parkway, and I remember I have to pull over, and there's really no shoulder. And it was so like my car would kind of be partly in the lane.
Mhm.
And I'd put on the hazards and I'd go in the back sleep and I'd fall asleep. And I'm like, I don't care if anybody hits me because there's no other choice. I can't see right now. I have such a headache. So
Mhm.
those started to weigh. But so when we talk about how did I do, well, those were some of the adjustments that I had to do, right? That's a very extreme example,
Right.
pulling over on the side of the road at 1 o'clock,
Right.
and not caring if I got hit by the car. But yeah, I would just take sick days just to mentally and emotionally recharge. Um, but what was funny though was while I was excellent in very dangerous situations at maintaining my calm and composure, and anybody I worked with would attest to that. I kind of made my bones on that. But it was everything else. Like if there was a discussion about a case that I could work or a way I wanted to do it, I wasn't necessarily thinking that
Mhm.
way. So I would
Mhm.
explode at my boss or whoever told me no. And again, I think back and go, I was right to be angry at their decision because I made a very good case, but I would just blah. Then that was Errol's a hothead if he doesn't get what he wants.
Right.
And ultimately it hurt a little bit, because when I
Right.
would present something that was logical, they just,
So,
oh, you're a hothead, so anyway, I'm not
so,
really.
but when you said that you when you worked in a highly stressful situation, you were able to maintain your composure,
Right.
and is it because you knew that was what's required of you to be able to be effective, but also did that affect your endurance, like after, or your mental capacities
Yeah.
after? Did
Yes.
you have
So
to need to recover?
100%. So I knew, and I've always known, even before, emotional awareness and the ability to recognize your emotion and understanding how you intuitively act on them, and making sure you have a behavior in your back pocket that say this situation calls for calm, aggressiveness, thoughtfulness,
Mhm.
whatever it was.
Mhm.
Okay. And so I knew that to be true.
Mhm.
I just had to take that to the next level, like we had discussed after the head injury, and I joined the FBI.
Mhm.
I was just so acutely and intently focused on the emotion, whether I was about to go out on a SWAT operation, whether we were going to go out on arrest, whether it was just going through and walking through a bad neighborhood, knowing I would be easily identified as a law enforcement officer. Anything can happen. So yes, totally in tune to how I was feeling, what I was doing. But to your point, after that, it was like, it was exhaustion, just complete exhaustion. You know, guys
How
like
long
Jack,
how
yeah,
long would it take you to recover?
it would depend. But like I said, there was times where I would take 2 or 3 days. I would take my sick time. You got sick time, and I would just say, and again, there's some flexibility, right? You don't always need a doctor's office. They trust that you're an adult. Call in to the boss, say, I'm not feeling well today. Do you mind if I take a sick day? Right? Yeah,
Mhm.
sure, go ahead.
Mhm.
Um, so that, that's all good, right? It's the way it should be.
Mhm.
And, there were times where I'd call in and it'd be the third day and they'd be like, look, are you okay? Do you need to go see a doctor? I said, no, I'm just a little under the weather. And it was really just the emotional recharge that I needed, So again, but look, sometimes it was just a good night's sleep. And sometimes you just had to work through it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's,
Definitely sleep, I mean, can make, like make miracles.
yeah.
It opens, it rests your brain, it lets it empty it out, and allows you to be able to deal with the next day.
But when you're not fully sleeping well all the
Right.
time, now we've got that compound thing happening. And
Absolutely.
it does, over time, it starts to beat you down. So when I got what's called a WAVI scan.
Mm-hmm.
And what the WAVI scan does is just measures the energy in
Mm-hmm.
every part of your brain. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of color coded. And so when I got the scan, and I can tell the story about how I even got on that journey with the doctor, but he showed me this blue area on the brain. And he says, do you see the blue? And I said, well, of course, because there's so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, right, that's the area of brain that's responsible for processing emotions. And the blue indicates that it's dormant. It's not working. Look, there's no, and then it shows I think it's megahertz in each
Mm-hmm.
area of your brain, how much energy is being processed. And it was like
Right.
0 in that part of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And that for me, I could have left and I would have been much better,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just knowing that there was a reason. I'm not crazy. Something happened. I got injured.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was some treatment that we got done, and we can talk about it if you like. But the bottom line is, after I got the next couple of scans, it showed increased energy in those areas of
Oh,
the brain. It
wow.
was coming back to life. And
Wow.
lo and behold, what was happening, Christine? I was sleeping better, right? My moods were better. I was able to process the emotions better, right? And then my whole life became better. Like
That's
everything.
amazing.
So what we started on was, so my doctor is a doctor of osteopathy, and he was a sports medicine doctor at first. So he was fixing shoulders and that,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff, right? And then he moved into this traumatic brain injury thing, and he did it because he had somebody come to them who was just at their end, wearing dark sunglasses, not opening their mail for a year, right? Just really about at their end. And the doc said, well, look, here's what I do to rejuvenate muscles.
Mm-hmm.
It's this form of stem cell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their own stem cells. And what he did was he used that kind of treatment. He took the patient's own stem cells from their blood with some vitamin, whatever his cocktail is. He's got a patent on it. And then it was a nasal drip into the nose, which went to the brain, which
Mm-hmm.
basically created energy in the brain.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So now I didn't even start with that. I started with an insulin prescription,
Mm-hmm.
which was, again, insulin. You take the needle out, you stick it up your nose as far as you can, you throw it back, your head's back, and now it's dripping into your brain. And what the insulin is doing, and the studies have shown, it creates energy in your brain.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the first treatments that I was getting that was revitalizing,
Mm-hmm.
everything. Then when I went on to the stem cell, and whatever his vitamin cocktail was with it, same thing though, just literally with a syringe, pushing it into up your nose as your head's back, dripping into the brain. The brain started to heal even more, create even more energy. And what we have is the WAVI scans, the side-by-side scans
Mm-hmm.
show it, right? There's no longer blue
That
on my
blue.
brain.
Wow.
So
Well,
it's,
who was it in Colorado that
yeah,
you
Dr. John Hughes is his name.
John Hughes? Okay.
Yep, John Hughes, and he's out here, and he, it's just what he does. And I just happen to have become friends with him, and so I stay on the insulin protocol.
Mm-hmm.
It's not every day. You do a series of 10 days, but so it's funny that it's timely that we just did this, because I just got another scan yesterday, and I'm going to speak with Dr. Hughes after this. But he just sent me a note. He says, look, your brain's maintaining just fine, looks great, right? Because what's the obvious fear? There's regression again. You go
Right.
back. But again, the point is there is stuff out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But here was the problem that I faced, Christine. Even after the brain started to get better, I then had a pattern of behavior that
Right.
I had to break, right? So even though something happened that really didn't make me angry,
Mm-hmm.
my brain was wired to get angry at those types of things. So I would start to get angry and I would laugh with my wife. I go, I know I just overreacted to that and I'm not actually angry. I don't know why I just did that. And
Yeah.
then it's, well, because that's how I'm wired.
Right.
Now I have
That
to
pattern of behavior.
the
You're talking
pattern of
about
behavior.
something from before the injury.
Um, no, it's how I behaved during the injury.
And your injury was like 25 years ago. So you've
Yes.
learned to adapt to.
Well, it's just, I think that pattern of behavior, somebody says something that I perceive as an insult. I will now act this way, right? There's a loud noise, right? That
Oh
sound
yeah.
sensitivity is real.
Right.
Stop that, shut up, or, whatever it is. Like I'll still, I have 3 young kids. I have an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a
Mm-hmm.
3-year-old. There's nothing but noises.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And every now and then I give my son a look, like, and he'll do that. And I'll go, you know what? Sorry about that. I don't know why I just looked at you. And then now I explain, I go, I do know why I just looked at you like that because I'm so used to overreacting to loud noises. I'm sorry I did that. You didn't do anything wrong. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so what I had to do then was go back to my own process. I had to go back then to the emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Here's what the emotion would have been. Here's what it is now. Here's what the intuitive action was before I started to get better, right? What do I want it to be now? How do I want to behave now? Now, what's my plan to execute that behavior? It's really funny. The thing that I did to survive this is now the same thing that I'm doing to rewire my brain to become a different person, to respond properly in these situations. A lot of times now I'm like, I feel normal because a lot of times responses will just ignore it. It doesn't matter. Like, you don't
Right.
have to do anything. You know what I mean?
No, you're absolutely right. Because before the injury or the concussion, it was, you knew what to ignore, you knew what to focus on, and the same thing. But after an injury, actually, it's, you develop more sensitivity. So it's a different type of environment. It's
Yeah.
the same. It looks the same, but the triggers are so much more apparent to you. And
Yeah.
I think that, especially when you're saying that you try to resolve it yourself, that a lot of times we tend to come up with like solutions or patterns that develops into habits,
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean it's effective.
That's right. That's
And then
right.
it takes you years to really figure out, hey, this is not effective, what do I do now? Or, and then now you have to go into the journey of the unbreaking of the patterns or the habit, which is
Yeah.
not no longer serving you.
Right. And here's what a challenge that I had was I was a relatively young man when these injuries happened. Right? I was an
Mhm.
adult, but still finding my way as an
Mhm.
adult.
Mhm.
And so now I don't have a lot to go back on. Right? I can't go, well, before the injury, I did these things. Before the injury, I was a kid.
Mhm.
I was 20,
Mhm.
whatever it was. So it's almost like creating a new personality, which you can. And a lot of here's where I think, in my experience, right? Because I coach people now, and there's this concern with authenticity, right?
Mhm.
And well, if I do this, Errol, if I become completely different, I will be inauthentic, and people won't buy it. And my response is always, what is more authentic than identifying a weakness and then working hard to improve it? And if it
Mhm.
means becoming a different person, is there anything more beautiful and authentic than that? So it's really just a frame of reference that people
Right.
need, right? A new
Right.
way of looking at authenticity. I know that's a big word nowadays,
Right.
but what does that even mean? And that's something I had to get past,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. People are going to say, "Well, Errol, who do you think you are? That you've always been this way. Now you're this way," and that's just simply my response. But people don't say it to me, right? And that's the other thing. I just assume they
Right.
would. People will call me inauthentic or whatever it is, and people just like being around me more now. So, you
No,
know,
absolutely. I
yeah,
actually think, I think leadership training that you're doing right now, it does, I think to be a leader, you really have to know yourself. And I myself, I got trained on transformational leadership. So it's really about knowing yourself. How do
yeah,
you react? How do you, what's your knee-jerk reactions and things like that. And really getting to know yourself more than anything else, and how you can be better, which is a lot of work,
yeah.
and it does take a lot of energy.
It does, and from a leadership perspective, right? And there's a couple ways to look at it, but when we talk about, just to expand on your point about knowing
Mhm,
yourself, when I'm selling my product, which is my
mhm,
process,
mhm,
people say, well, oh, it sounds like more of a self-improvement journey. And I said, well, that's
mhm.
exactly what it is.
It
That's what
is.
every improvement journey is. And I said, when you start to figure yourself out, you're going to start to see it in other people. This doesn't operate in a bubble. The more
Mhm.
self-aware you become, which you have to become that first, you're going to start extending that out to your team or your organization or your family or your friend.
Absolutely.
You're going to recognize, like, wow, Christine just really reacted that way. And instead of like the old me, let's just say you said something to me and I took offense, I would immediately fight back. How dare you insult?
Mhm.
Right? Now I can think to myself, well, wow, that's a really interesting thing she just said. I wonder what emotion is driving that.
Right.
And now I can start having a conversation with you. Christine, is everything okay? Because that was a really hurtful thing you just said. Are you
Mhm.
okay? I'm
Mhm.
not responding to what you said. I'm
Mhm.
responding to what may have driven you to say that.
Mhm.
And those are two different
Two
things, and
different
that
things,
leaders do.
and it's
They
actually
get to
very
the root.
powerful.
Right. Right. They get to
And
the root. And until you
right.
don't understand your own root, you can't understand somebody else's. You just can't.
But just it kind of goes back to what I was saying. I mean, even if you don't know the root cause of the deficit, you
Yeah.
won't be able to, to truly treat and someone effectively.
You can't. And that goes back to the whole thing. When I said to you, when I saw that scan and the doctor
Hmm.
said this part of your brain isn't working, I had understanding. I could have
Hmm.
walked away with no treatment. I still would have struggled, but I would have at least been, there's a reason for this. So don't just be so hard
Right?
on yourself,
Yeah.
right? Because
No,
that's
you're
one thing
not
we do.
just, yeah.
We beat
You're not,
ourselves up, you
yeah,
know?
that you're not just complaining
Right,
and coming
right,
up with something.
right.
No, it's
And
amazing. So what are you doing now? So you wrote your book.
yeah, so I do, I call it leadership coaching, and I work with corporations and leaders. And you know what the what I knew to be true, but my clients are finding is, look, I have to present it as leadership training because it's essentially what I do. But they're giving me their new employees, people just getting on board, because what they've realized is this process, this thing I call the Leader 193 way, it is effective for everybody. For
Hmm.
everybody to know a process of understanding your emotions, how you intuitively act on those emotions, then deciding after what you've observed how you want to behave and who you want to be, and then knowing how to make a plan, and then understanding that you're going to fall off course sometimes. You're going to have missteps, and it's okay. That benefits everybody.
Absolutely.
And so we do it with, again, individual contributors, and I do it with leaders who have teams, but the process is always the same. We always start, we go through that process. Now, a leader with a big team or even a little team will have the responsibility to extend that process
Hmm.
to his
Hmm.
team, okay,
Hmm.
and how he or she does business. The individual contributor won't need to do that, but
Hmm.
it's still the same process. It's still the same way of thinking. It's just a logical problem solving methodology, right? problems are not all relative.
Mm-hmm.
They're just problems. Some are more severe and deeper in scope than others. But what I just described is what we go through for every challenge or problem that we have, big or
Absolutely.
small, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so that's what I do. I include, I call it, leadership through process and wellness. The process is the process. What I just described to you. What's the wellness portion? Well, when when I got the treatment from Dr. Hughes, and then he saw the truly dramatic increases in activity and voltage in my brain, he said, I've never seen anything like it. And I said, well, what do you attribute that to? Well, I had explained to him this leadership process. He goes, I attribute it to that. And I
Mm-hmm.
attribute it to this cold exposure and breathing you do, this Wim Hof method, because what that's shown to do is kind of reset the nervous system and all of these things. And that's maybe a discussion for
I
another
love
time.
Wim Hof.
Yeah. So, but that's part of the process, right? And what he said was, you did these things. So your body, your brain, your mind, your spirit was so primed to get better that
Uh-huh.
once we added that little catalyst,
Mm-hmm.
you just exploded with energy. So what's the point? That's what I'm doing right now. But what I tell people is, how do I, right? Errol is a leadership consultant. Well, how do you know you're going to get better if you come work with me, other than I guarantee it? I just say the Leader 193 way has been validated because of my brain injury.
Right.
The doctor literally said the severity of your injury was so bad that you should, first of all, not have been a functional member of society. You should have been in a very dark place. And at worst, you should have been one of those 22 veterans a day who's committing suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if that doesn't get your attention, nothing will.
Mm-hmm.
So the process, according to the doctor, he said that saved your life.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we were able to get some help, some real help, everything just exploded with the energy. So I just say, look, if that doesn't validate the ability to have personal improvement, learn how to solve problems in a functional way, I don't know what does. So that's what I'm doing, and that's how I use, my experience to really validate to anybody. If I did this to save my life, you can do this to be a better boss, right? You can at least consider it, give it a try, right?
Amazing. It's just so it makes it's just so much, it makes so much sense on, like everything that you did. But it really was, like after the injury, it really was about focusing on you, what you needed, to succeed. And I think it's just something, it's like it's an amazing story. There's so much, perseverance, determination, and just insight. It's a huge part of what you went through, was really taking the time to like gain insight into your injury and how this changed you, and not letting it define you.
And it it did, Christine, for many years define me without me knowing it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the problem, right? That's the challenge. When we talk about this invisible injury, and
Mm-hmm.
we talk about the struggles that people who have this, you know, your behavior defines you. It
Mm-hmm.
just does. But then when you know that there is a reason for it, that's when you can start moving away from allowing it to define you. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have control over it. But it's really not until then. It's not until somebody goes and sees Christine Weaver and says, I have a problem. And you say, yeah, you have traumatic brain injury.
Mm-hmm.
You've already helped them,
Mm-hmm.
right? You've already allowed them to move away from being defined by an injury they didn't even know they had, to now being defined by how I'm working to get better. That's now
Right.
how I define myself. The TBI thing, I understand how people would not want to make it public, right? I
Mm-hmm.
just do. There's, for some reason, there's some embarrassment to it. There's some stigma, like, oh, I have a brain injury, so you think I'm going to be brain damaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what
Mm-hmm.
people, and all I can say is you have to get past that. You have to
Right.
just be accepting of it's just an injury.
Yeah, because it's you stop yourself from getting the help that you truly need, and
Right.
it only just piles up, and it bogs someone down. And then interestingly enough that you mentioned that, because I know that people who are in the military, they won't necessarily just ask for help, whether you're foot or people in athletics, football players or police officers, people in the fire department. I know that that is something that makes it harder is because they have to be the guy's guy. They have to be strong for their family. However, I mean, just like what we said in what we say in planes, you put your oxygen mask on first before you could save others.
Well, you're exactly right. And look, let's also understand, right? And you're right when you say I have to be the man's man. You have to be the woman's woman also. We've got women in law enforcement and firefighting
Right.
and all of these
Right.
all
Absolutely.
of these very adrenaline push
Driven, yes.
jobs, and even professional athletes. It's going to be the same reaction. And I think that's why I have a little bit of credibility in this very soft message, quote unquote, around this all starts with the emotional awareness because I've got that background. And
Right.
now somebody who's feeling like they're overly macho or macha, as the case may be, the men or the woman,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
I at least have that background to say, no, no, I'm in that category. And now I'm telling you,
Hmm.
emotion. Let's get over it because that's where it matters. That's where the performance enhancement comes, whether you've got an injury or anything else.
Hmm.
Um, so it's there is a stigma. I'm not so sure though. It's not a stigma that people with the injury put on themselves, because I've never had anybody do anything except for thank me and for sharing my story and all these things. I've never had anybody go, well, do you have
Hmm.
brain damage? Is there something wrong with you? Like
Right.
I might think they might say,
Right.
or somebody else, and people don't. And if people do, now with your newfound reality about who you want to be and how you want to react, you get to say, that's not a person I need in my life. Right? That's somebody I can say, thank you very much. Good to meet you. I'm out.
Yes.
Because that's no longer what I surround myself with.
Right.
But getting people, I think the awareness is the first part, right? They have to know that there's a reason, and then getting past this stigma and not being able to talk about it because you might
Mhm.
act like you're a less than.
Right.
You're not. You're actually more than if
Yes,
you're talking about it.
absolutely. And I think there's also that acceptance, and some people can take that as a kind of a surrender.
Mhm.
However, I don't really see it as a surrender, but just being more open to possibilities, you know.
It's
I
just
think.
what it is. It's not
Mhm.
good. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's what it is.
Right, right.
You have an injury.
Hmm.
That's it. That's all
Hmm.
it is.
Yes, yes,
You don't need to surround it with judgment. You just
yes.
need to surround it with, okay, what now?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think judgment should not be there, especially from yourself,
Right.
from us. And I think that that's the first thing that actually comes that a lot of the clients or survivors that I would talk to is that they've already labeled themselves so much more than how others have labeled them.
Yep.
And I think also it's about perception, not to downplay what the survivors are going through, but
Right.
sometimes we just have to really kind of step out from that because I think that there's going to be a lot of people who would be willing to help out.
There's there are, and it's interesting, and that help is going to come from maybe the places you've never known before. And here's what
Mhm.
I can say about that. When I said right from the beginning, when I went to that medical review board and they made me feel the way I did, I vowed walking out of that office I would never talk about this injury. And you know, up until 2 years ago, my best friends in the world would say, why don't you ever talk about what you've been through?
Mhm.
Not even the injury. I just never talked about being a SEAL. I never,
Mhm.
and I'd say, because it doesn't matter. It's in the past. It's over. I'm on to the next.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I met Dr. Hughes at a dinner party, for goodness sakes, right? My brother and sister-in-law had a party. They said, come on over, we're having some friends. And we're just making small talk. And he was just talking about what he's doing with traumatic brain injury. I shared, it's funny, Christine, because I said to myself, well, you know what? Now's maybe a time to share your story because maybe it'll help the doc, right? So it really did come from a place of unselfishness. And I said, well, you know, hey, doc, that's great with what you're doing. I can relate. Here's what happened to me. And, you know, and I remember he asked me, he goes, well, so what happened? And I said, well, that's what happened. I had those injuries. And he said, no, what happened after that? I said, well, I got medically discharged. He goes, no, what happened to you? Right? How were you feeling? And I had to make a very conscious decision. Is it time to talk about this? If I had just said, everything's good, he may not have said, come in for a scan. I want to see for myself. Right? Instead, I said, well, I struggled. And I went through some of the struggles. And that was the first time that I had ever talked about it. And look what happened. Right? He said, come on in. We got to get a scan and see what's going on. And I said, okay. And now I live a new life. I truly live a new life. My wife says that, you know, she's married. She's still married to the person who she married, those best parts of me. But now all the bad parts have seemed to have disappeared. Right? Right. And now there's a new, better person. Right? If that's not validation enough, I don't know what is.
Yeah. No, I think it's amazing. It's such an outstanding story. Your story actually always have fascinated me, and I've always thought, you know, like your story has to go out so much more to other people and reach out and reach more people. And not so much as the success of it, but there's a lot of like wisdom in what you had said, and there's a lot of understanding of how not necessarily the brain injury puts on you or the effect of it, but there's a lot of things of how we perceive things too, you know, that we have to kind of break apart from the way we, you know, our habits, our patterns. And it's a very conscious decision, and it's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
It is a lot
Again,
of
like
work.
we said, even if you end up getting a treatment that heals your brain, you've got now some rewiring to do because you have established a pattern of behavior
Yeah.
that we want to undo because that's not the optimal behavior. So look, you know, talking to you, all I want is to get this story out to help people. It sounds cliche, but if one person's listening, that it's worth the hour, you know, we've been talking to each other, certainly. So anything else I can ever do to support what you're doing, you just let me know, because I'm a fan of yours and how you're helping people, and I'm thankful for you to keep up your great work. And if I could ever continue to add benefit, then you just say the word.
Oh my gosh, Errol, thank you so much. I mean, it's such a compliment, and I really appreciate your time being here, sharing your story. Such a big value to everyone, whether or not they know someone or they've been through a brain injury. I think there's a lot of insight and wisdom in this hour, you know, that we spoke about. So
let's do it again then.
yes, we will. We will find opportunities to do so. Well, thank you so much, Errol. I deeply appreciate your time and your story and all your efforts you're doing.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
Thank you so much. We will talk again.
Okay, indeed.
Have a great day and say hi to your family.
All right, will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.